She thought the nightmare was over until the evidence pointed back at someone she trusted. In every ongoing investigation, there comes a moment when the public begins to feel the weight of silence, a moment when the unanswered questions grow louder than the official statements. And in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, that moment has stretched into something that refuses to let go. Because while the world continues to move forward, investigators are still standing in the same place, staring at the same puzzle, searching for the one piece that refuses to reveal itself. And the longer it stays hidden, the more people begin to wonder how something like this could happen in plain sight, and how it could remain unresolved for so long. From the very beginning, detectives have been honest about one thing. They are struggling. Not with effort, not with commitment, but with motive. The sheriff himself admitted that the investigation is stuck on the one question that should have been the easiest to answer. Why? Why would anyone want Nancy Guthrie gone? Why would anyone take a risk that carries consequences that last a lifetime? Why would anyone choose a path that leaves a family in permanent uncertainty? And the truth is, investigators still don't know. They have theories, they have possibilities, they have long nights spent reviewing the same details over and over again, but they do not have a clear direction. They do not have the one explanation that ties everything together. Some have wondered whether this could have been an act of revenge, a personal decision made by someone who felt wronged, someone who believed they had something to settle. But even that theory sits on shaky ground, because nothing in Nancy's life points to a conflict that would justify such a drastic action. Nothing suggests she was involved in anything that would lead to this kind of outcome. And that is what makes the case so difficult. When there is no motive, there is no path. When there is no path, there is no suspect. And when there is no suspect, the investigation becomes a maze with no exit. Yet, even in the middle of that uncertainty, something unexpected happened. A development that brought a spark of hope back into a case that desperately needed it. The FBI uncovered a DNA breakthrough, a piece of forensic evidence that could finally shift the investigation out of neutral. It wasn't a full answer, not yet, but it was enough to remind everyone that progress is still possible, that even in the darkest moments of an investigation, science has a way of revealing what people try to hide. And when that breakthrough became public, it wasn't just investigators who reacted. It was the family. It was Savannah Guthrie using her voice not as a journalist, not as a public figure, but as someone who is living through a nightmare that refuses to end. She issued an emotional plea, asking anyone with information, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant it may seem, to come forward. Because families in these situations don't just wait. They carry the weight of every unanswered question. They replay every memory. They wonder what they missed, what they could have done differently, and why they are forced to live in a reality where closure feels so far away. Her plea wasn't dramatic. It wasn't exaggerated. It was the kind of message that comes from someone who is exhausted, someone who is hurting, someone who knows that the only thing worse than bad news is no news at all. And that plea resonated with people because it reminded everyone that behind every headline is a family trying to hold themselves together. But even with the DNA development, even with renewed attention, investigators remain cautious. They know that breakthroughs can lead to answers, but they can also lead to more questions. They know that evidence can point in the right direction, but it can also reveal how much more there is to uncover. And they know that until the motive is understood, the case remains incomplete. This is where the investigation stands today. A sheriff openly acknowledging the struggle to understand why this happened, detectives reviewing every angle, refusing to give up, the FBI pushing forward with forensic analysis, and a family waiting for the moment when the phone rings with something other than uncertainty. And while the public watches from the outside, It's easy to forget how cases like this affect the people closest to them. It's easy to forget that every day without answers is another day of emotional exhaustion, another day of wondering whether someone out there knows the truth and is choosing to stay silent, another day of hoping that the next update will finally bring clarity. This is why stories like this matter, because they remind us that unresolved cases don't fade away. They linger. They follow families into their homes, into their routines, into their thoughts. They create a kind of emotional weight that never fully lifts until the truth is revealed. And the longer the truth stays hidden, the heavier that weight becomes. So, if you're watching this, if you care about cases that deserve answers, if you believe that families should never be left in the dark, then make sure you share this video. Make sure you like it, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the updates as this case continues to unfold. Because the more people who hear Nancy Guthrie's name, the more pressure there is for answers. And the more pressure there is for answers, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay buried. This investigation is not over. It is active, it is ongoing, and it is moving, if even slowly. The sheriff has made it clear that nothing is being ruled out. The FBI has made it clear that the forensic work is far from finished, and the family has made it clear that they will not stop searching for the truth. And neither should we. Because cases like this don't just test investigators, they test communities, they test compassion, they test whether people are willing to pay attention even when the headlines fade. And if you're still here, still listening, still caring, then you are part of the reason this case continues to receive attention. So stay with us, stay engaged, stay aware, and remember that every share, every comment, every moment of awareness brings us one step closer to the truth. The story of Nancy Guthrie is still unfolding, and the next development could come at any moment. And when it does, you'll want to be here to witness it. And as the investigation stretches forward, something else begins to take shape. Not in the evidence, not in the official statements, but in the quiet spaces between updates. A pattern of hesitation, a pattern of unanswered questions that no one seems fully prepared to confront. Because while the public hears about the search for motive, investigators are facing something far more complicated, the possibility that the truth may involve people who never expected to be examined this closely. Behind every interview, every re-interview, every follow-up call, there are individuals who once believed they were on the periphery of Nancy's life, people who assumed they had nothing to contribute, nothing to clarify, nothing to explain. But as detectives continue to revisit the timeline, those same individuals are finding themselves pulled back into the center of the conversation. Not because they are suspects, but because the smallest detail, a forgotten interaction, a casual comment, a moment that seemed irrelevant at the time, could be the key that unlocks everything. And that is where the tension grows. Because when an investigation lasts this long, people begin to worry about what they might have overlooked. They begin to question their own memories. They begin to wonder whether something they dismissed months ago might actually matter now. And that uncertainty creates a ripple effect, one that investigators can feel every time they knock on a door or make a phone call. Meanwhile, the forensic teams continue their work, quietly, methodically, knowing that every new test carries the weight of expectation. The DNA development that sparked renewed hope is only the beginning. There are additional samples being reviewed, additional comparisons being made, additional possibilities being explored. And while none of these steps guarantee answers, each one represents a chance to uncover something that was missed, something that was overlooked, something that could finally shift the investigation into a new phase. But even with these developments, there is a growing awareness that someone, somewhere, may be holding on to information they have not shared. Not out of malice, not out of intent, but out of fear. Fear of being involved, fear of being judged, fear of being wrong, fear of being right. And that fear can be powerful enough to keep people silent, even when they know that silence carries consequences. This is why the emotional plea from the family matters so deeply, because it wasn't just a request for information, it was a reminder that every withheld detail, every unspoken memory, every moment of hesitation prolongs the suffering of people who have already endured more than enough. It was a reminder that the investigation is not just a procedural effort, it is a human effort, and human efforts require courage, honesty, and compassion. Investigators have said repeatedly that they are not ruling anything out, and that statement, while simple, carries a weight that many people underestimate. It means that every possibility remains on the table. It means that every relationship, every interaction, every event leading up to Nancy's disappearance is being examined with fresh eyes. It means that no assumption is safe, no conclusion is final, and no detail is too small to matter. And as this process continues, the community finds itself in a difficult position. On one hand, they want answers. On the other, they fear what those answers might reveal. Because when a case lingers this long, it forces people to confront the uncomfortable truth that the explanation may not come from a stranger. It may come from someone familiar, someone trusted, someone who never expected to be connected to something like this. This is the part of the investigation that rarely makes headlines, the quiet tension, the subtle shifts in behavior, the way people begin to watch each other differently, speak more carefully, remember more selectively, the way uncertainty spreads through a community until everyone feels it, even if they don't say it out loud. And through all of this, the investigators continue their work. They continue to analyze the evidence. They continue to revisit the timeline. They continue to push forward, even when the path ahead is unclear, because they know that somewhere within the details, the interviews, the forensic reports, the digital records, the overlooked moments, lies the truth. And they know that the truth does not stay hidden forever. But they also know that time changes things. Memories fade, stories shift, people move on. And that is why cases like this require persistence. They require attention. They require a public that refuses to let the story fade into the background. So if you're still here, still listening, still invested, then you are part of the reason this case continues to move forward. You are part of the pressure that keeps the investigation alive. You are part of the collective voice that says this cannot be forgotten, this cannot be ignored, this cannot be allowed to slip into silence. And that is why it matters that you share this video, that you like it, that you subscribe and turn on notifications, because awareness is not just a number, it is a force that keeps cases active, a force that keeps investigators supported, a force that keeps families from being left behind. This case is still unfolding. There are developments happening behind the scenes that have not yet been made public. There are questions being asked that have not yet been answered. There are people being re-examined, evidence being retested, timelines being reconstructed. And every one of those steps brings us closer to the moment when the truth finally comes into focus. Stay with this. Stay engaged, stay aware, because the next update could change everything. And when it does, you'll want to be here to witness it. Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because awareness is far from over.